On a quiet Friday afternoon in April 1988, an 8-year-old girl in Fort Wayne, Indiana, ran back to her friend's house to grab her umbrella. It was raining. She was gone in less than a minute. 3 days later, a jogger found her body in a ditch on the edge of town. For the next 30 years, the man who killed her watched the investigation from less than 20 miles away, and every few years he wrote the police a letter, just to let them know he was still out there. This is the story of April Tinsley and the note writer who finally slipped up. April Marie Tinsley was 8 years old. She was in the 2nd grade at Fairfield Elementary School in Fort Wayne. She sang in the children's choir at Faith United Methodist Church. By every account from people who knew her, she was the kind of kid who remembered to bring her umbrella. On Friday, April 1st, 1988, Good Friday, April was playing outside with 2 of her friends. The 3 of them were moving between houses on her street, the way kids do on a day off school. At some point in the afternoon, April realized she'd left her umbrella behind at one of the houses. She went back to get it. That was around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. She never made it home for dinner. When April's mother realized she wasn't there, she called the police. Within hours, the Fort Wayne Police Department had 250 officers out searching for her, along with 50 volunteers. A witness would later come forward and say they'd seen a white man in his 30s forcing a girl who looked like April into a blue pickup truck. But in those first chaotic hours, there was almost nothing to go on. 3 days later, on April 4th, a jogger running along a road just west of Spencerville, a small community about 20 miles east of Fort Wayne, found April's body in a shallow ditch. She was partially clothed. One of her shoes lay nearby. In a shopping bag close to the body, investigators found a sex toy. A motorist who came forward later said he had seen a blue pickup truck parked near that same ditch the day before. April's autopsy concluded she had been raped, then strangled to death. The medical examiner estimated she'd been dead for 1 to 2 days before she was found, and that her body had been placed in that ditch only about 4 hours before the jogger stumbled onto it. The killer had kept her somewhere else for almost the entire weekend. The first lead broke almost immediately. Within weeks of the murder, Fort Wayne detectives had a 34-year-old man in custody on a separate child molestation charge. He was the kind of person the profile was looking for. He lived in the area. He drove a truck. He was acquitted of those charges the next month, and the case against him for April's murder collapsed with it. Police were back to square one. The community wasn't. Less than 3 weeks after April disappeared, 90 of her neighbors and parents from across Fort Wayne formed a volunteer group called April. Associated Parents Regional Independent League. They printed flyers. They walked neighborhoods. They knocked on doors. For the next 2 years, April kept April's face on every telephone pole and grocery store bulletin board in Allen County, Indiana. But no one came forward with anything that broke the case. For the next 2 years, the file sat in a drawer. Then, in May 1990, the killer broke his own silence. On May 21st, 1990, a woman walking her dog past a barn in St. Joseph Township, just north of Fort Wayne, noticed something strange on the side of the building. Someone had written a message in crayon, in big clumsy letters. It read, "I kill 8-year-old April Marie Tinsley." The killer had even misspelled her name. Below it, the message continued. "Did you find the other shoe? Ha ha ha, I will kill again." Police collected the crayons. They sent them to a lab. They tested them for DNA, for fingerprints, for any biological trace. But in 1990, forensic science wasn't advanced enough, and the killer had used a public space at night with materials anyone could buy at a hardware store. There was almost nothing to find. Investigators initially wondered if the note writer might also be responsible for the murder of a second child. 7-year-old Sarah Jean Bowker, whose body had been found in Fort Wayne almost exactly a month before the note was discovered. The two cases had eerie similarities. Local and state police formed a joint homicide team in April 1991 to investigate them together. But the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit, after reviewing the evidence, concluded in August 1991 that the two cases were ultimately unrelated. The note writer, they said, was a preferential child sex offender, someone with a long-term, persistent sexual fixation on children. He wasn't impulsive. He had planned this, and he was still out there. Then, for almost 13 years, he went quiet. Over the Memorial Day weekend in 2004, 4 notes turned up in different parts of Fort Wayne. 3 of them were tucked into the baskets of girls' bicycles. The 4th was left in a residential mailbox. 3 of the 4 notes came inside clear plastic bags, and inside each bag, alongside the note, was a used condom and a Polaroid photo showing a man's lower body. One of the notes read, in the same clumsy handwriting, "Hi, honey. I've been watching you. I am the same person that kidnapped and raped and killed April Tinsley. You are my next victim. If you don't report this to police, and if I don't see this in the paper tomorrow or on the local news, I will blow up your house." This time, the science had caught up. Police tested the condoms for DNA. The DNA profile matched the one they had developed from the original crime scene in 1988. It was the same man, and for the first time in 16 years, the killer was communicating on a timeline they could actually work with. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit re-engaged. The television program America's Most Wanted ran a segment in 2009. Crime Watch Daily covered the case in 2016. Parabon Nanolabs, a Virginia-based DNA phenotyping company, released a snapshot composite sketch of the suspect in 2015, and police released an updated version in May 2016. The sketch showed a white man, somewhere in his 40s or 50s, with light-colored eyes, a heavy jaw, and a receding hairline. But the case still went nowhere. Whoever he was, he had never been in the criminal database. He had no prior convictions. There was nothing to compare his DNA against, until a genealogy website changed everything. In May 2018, a Fort Wayne police detective sent a sample of the suspect's DNA to Parabon Nanolabs. Parabon's team uploaded the profile to GED Match, a public genealogy database that lets people compare their DNA with strangers who share ancestors. The genealogist, Cece Moore, the same woman who had helped identify the Golden State Killer just a few months earlier, started building family trees from the DNA matches. Within 2 months, she had narrowed the suspect list to 2 brothers. One of them was a 59-year-old man named John D. Miller. He lived in Grabble, a small town about 15 miles east of Fort Wayne. His neighbors described him as reclusive, sometimes angry. He kept to himself. Detectives went to Miller's house on July 15, 2018, and asked him to come down to the police station to talk. They read him his rights. They told him he was free to leave at any time. Then they asked him, very directly, if he knew why they wanted to talk to him. According to police, Miller looked at them and said, "April Tinsley." In a recorded interview that followed, Miller confessed. He told detectives he had planned to kidnap a child that day in 1988, but that he had not seen April before abducting her. He said he had asked her to get into his car, and that he had taken her to his trailer, where he raped her and choked her to death. That night, he put her body in a ditch on the edge of town. He had lived less than half an hour from where she was found for the next 30 years. In a court hearing on December 7, 2018, Miller changed his plea to guilty. He told the court, on the record, that he had raped April and strangled her with his bare hands. On December 21, 2018, an Allen County judge sentenced him to 80 years in prison, 50 for murder, 30 for child molestation. His earliest possible release date would have been July 15, 2058, when he would have been 99 years old. But he never made it. On September 4, 2025, John D. Miller died of natural causes in an Indianapolis hospital at age 66, never having told a single person in 37 years what he had done. The only person who ever knew the truth was the girl he buried in a ditch. In May 2019, 9 investigators who had worked the case across 3 decades from the Fort Wayne Police Department, the Indiana State Police, the FBI, and the Allen County Sheriff's Department were given a National Policing Award. The citation read, in part, that the case had taken tireless collaborative efforts conducted over the span of 30 years. In the Hoagland Masterson neighborhood of Fort Wayne, a small memorial called April's Garden was dedicated to her memory. A pink magnolia tree and a bench at Fairfield Elementary School, the school she would have graduated from, still stand in her name. For 30 years, the people of Fort Wayne lived with the knowledge that the man who killed April Tinsley was walking among them, sending letters, taunting detectives, getting older. For 30 years, he thought he had gotten away with it. He hadn't. April Tinsley was 8 years old. She remembered her umbrella. The man who killed her is dead. The case is closed. If you want to see more cases like this, solved decades later by DNA, by family trees, by the slow grind of people who never stopped looking, subscribe